Good morning. I hope you're all nice and warm. Are we warmed up yet? Do you need to maybe scoot in together and huddle for warmth? Get close to your neighbor. I wore one of my new stoles that I got when I was ordained at chenille, and I thought it would be the one that I could best use as a scarf if it got sort of too cold, I don't know if that's irreverent, but anyway, it's purple, which is my favorite color anyway. I have a couple announcements to start us off this morning. First of all, there is a YAG group. If you don't know what YAG is, it's short for Young Adult Group. We have started a college group, but as many of our college folks go away to school, we tend to do things over holidays. So if you're a young adult, particularly college age, next Saturday we will be meeting. Nancy Brown is hosting us, and all of the details are on our website. Our website address should be in the front of your bulletin. Our YAG events, all of our youth events, and all of our BYOB, Bring Your Own Bible family events are always put on the website way ahead of time so you can plan out your calendar. So if you have college-age kids, college-age kids, check the calendar on the website and send them over to YAG. We're still trying to figure out a mascot for YAG. It's kind of like a yak, but we're not sure. Kids are pretty creative, though. The second announcement is a really fun one we didn't get in the bulletin. It is for our youth winter event. How many of you were at the auction, where we auctioned off our kids shamelessly? Okay. As you know, that was for our Adopt a Family program. So this winter, we have adopted two single-parent families who are in need this holiday with a total of 5 kids to shop for. So during coffee hour on the patio for the Sundays, this Sunday, next Sunday, the 27th, and the last Sunday will be December 4th, we will have a tree with gift tags. We ask that you take a gift tag home. You can shop for the specific gift. You can get an appropriate gift card for the amount of the gift, or we'll take cash, right? We're not picky. Bring your unwrapped donation on December 11th after church, when there's a church fair, the alternative fair on the 11th. If you have any questions, contact Nancy Ellington, Martha Burdikin, or Sue Hefner, our fearless leaders. Isn't that wonderful? So this morning, we are talking about a passage in Ephesians. I like to preach from the lectionary, which means that somewhere around the world, someone else is also preaching on this text. And I think that's a great unifying Christian thing. Hopefully you're at a good one. I don't know. Someone may be at a better one somewhere else. But we are focusing on Ephesians that Jackson read so wonderfully. Isn't it great to have Jackson home? He's a banana slug. How many banana slugs? Yeah, he came down because his brother and Dylan and Danny Brown, if you know who he is, were in a play for Rolling Hills Prep called Golden Prospects. And it was one of those old-timey melodramas where everyone goes like this. And everyone in the audience goes boo or hiss. So I had this weird stress dream that when I preached, you all started doing that. Sorry, yeah. I think I've started something unfortunate, though. I'm going to be at American Martyrs giving the thing, and people are going to be like, the Catholics are going to be like, hiss. No, it'll be fine. But this, as you know, is a Thanksgiving prayer that Paul is sending to the church in Ephesus. And what I was thinking about in terms of Thanksgiving and being grateful and being kind of a bright star, as you know, if you looked, I always like to have creative sort of weird titles to my sermons. This one is called Black Holes and Other Stars. And I was thinking about the opposite of gratefulness, the opposite of being a light, because Paul talks about enlightening our hearts. The opposite is darkness. The opposite is kind of the darkness, the lightness being taken from the room. And I thought about the idea of black holes. Black holes supposedly exist. No one knows for sure. They think they exist. And they think they're collapsed stars. They think they are where all the darkness is sort of eats up the light. Obviously, I wasn't a science major. So my explanation lacks maybe truthiness. But anyway, if there's light, we all know there must be dark, right? So you have black holes. And the thing I also thought of was that there are sadly people like that in our lives. I know I grew up with a relative who died long ago, who I loved to the best of my ability, but every time I would go over to this person's house, I would leave feeling wah, wah. Because nothing was positive, right? Nothing was good. Nothing was joy-filled. Nothing was thankful. Everything was gossip, or this person did this, or this did that. And I just never felt light when I left. And it made me think of one of my favorite Saturday Night Live sketches. I know. You all watch Saturday Night Live. I did in the 90s. And there was a sketch called Debbie Downer. Did you ever see that sketch? Rachel Dratch starred in it. The first one was a family at Disney World, and actually it was the Saturday night that Lindsay Lohan hosted. This is before all the drugs and rehab and before all the arrests, when she was still cute and like Herbie the Love Bug, and oh, she was so cute. And she was with her family at Disney World, and you have Debbie Downer, who even her hair was sort of like, everything about her was sort of downer, right? And if you watch the sketch, which I did this week on Hulu, just to make sure I was saying everything as accurate as I could, if I can't get the science right, I'm going to get the cultural stuff right. And they show the sketch that they did in rehearsal because it's the one where they all crack up. Everyone, Jimmy Fallon's in the sketch, Horatio Sands is in the sketch, it's the old kind of group, and not one of them has a straight face by the end because they're laughing so hard. Because they're all sitting there talking, and someone will be like, oh, we're at Disney World, and we're sitting here having, pancakes that look like Mickey Mouse, and I'm gonna order steak and eggs. And she goes, have you heard about mad cow disease? And then the camera pans in on her face, and you hear, wah, wah, and she goes, they talk about costumes. Look at all the people dressed up in their wonderful costumes at Disney World. And she goes, he's probably in his 3rd stage of heat stroke. Wah, wah. So there's all these ways in which the family's trying to have fun, and she's saying things like feline AIDS, I might have the melanoma, I can't have children, just these sort of awkward things in the midst of their delightful mood. And she brings down the mood. And I think there are people like that in our lives. People where you feel like, wah, wah, or groups of people where you feel like, wah, wah. And I was wondering how to combat that, how we combat that. And I think that actually Paul, in a sort of strange way, although he wouldn't have had Debbie Downer or Hulu or TV or any of that, or maybe even knowledge of black holes at the time he was writing to the church in Ephesus, he was talking to the church about how they move forward and grow. And if you read carefully, he sort of gives you this formula in Ephesians 1:15-23, this wonderful prayer he gives, about how to combat negativity. And it seems to be with gratitude and with hope. Paul's addressing the entire church in Ephesus. So a few things you need to know. I always do a lesson. I always let you know what's going on in Ephesus. I want you to know that in this passage, when he says, for this reason, ever since I've heard about your faith and your love, all the yous, I never stop giving thanks for you. He's talking about the you collective. In the Greek, it's plural. Okay? So while we can get some individualistic understanding from this text, the text is actually talking to the entire church as a collective. This church that's a fledgling church. And he wants their eyes to be enlightened with gratitude and with hope. And he's sharing how to get that. Basically, Paul is saying, I pray that your inward being might be open to God, that your heart will be soft so that God can teach you. I pray that you would be thirsty to know God. And what's interesting is the words he uses are sort of fascinating. He used words like riches, great power, mighty strength, glorious, enlightened, far above, rule, authority, dominion. Not small words, not weak words. And why would he possibly use those words in the context of a prayer to this church? Well, let me tell you a little about the city of Ephesus. Ephesus is a huge and influential city during this time. Its religion was the goddess Artemis or Diana, depending if you were Greek or Roman. Her temple was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world in Ephesus. She was the god of the hunt, of wilderness, of bear, of fertility, of maidenhood. And the city, Ephesus, had its coins, and on its coins that said Temple Warden, which meant that this city, Ephesus, was a designated special city to this goddess, right? The sister of Apollo. We hear about Ephesus also in Acts. Acts, as you know, comes after the Gospels. It was written by Luke, who wrote the Gospel of Luke. He's writing about the early church. Acts is sort of the activity of the early church. And then the letters that come after, like Romans and Corinthians and Ephesians and Colossians, those are all books written to the church that's already begun by Paul. And in Acts 19, it talks about Ephesus. Paul goes into the synagogue and speaks boldly there for 3 months, but he's pushed out because no one really likes him. You know, we all can't be liked. We try, but we can't be liked. He ends up going to a lecture hall, like a public lecture hall in the city. It was a big city. And at the end of the time there, he's there for 2 years. At the end of the time, he causes a riot where all the workers who are making money because they're making statues of the goddess Artemis, they're kind of mad that they're not going to make money, and so they storm him, and they chant for hours in front of him, "Great is the Artemis of the Ephesians," right? This power, and it's only a city clerk who knew, government, that helps him out and gets him kind of out of there at the end of the time. So he's there for 2 years. So this is a significant amount of time for Paul, who is the first church planter. He's the first one starting the Christian churches. And he starts this church in Ephesus. The commerce, Ephesians was a very wealthy church. It was a banking center. It was a cultural hub. Education, it had a massive library, one of the biggest during that time. It kind of knew knowledge as power, right? It had a theater that seated probably about 22,000 people that was for political, cultural, artistic events. And of course, it was overseen by Roman power, which, as we know, could be effective and brutal. So, all of the words, glorious, wisdom, right? We have a library, revelation, enlightenment, riches, incomparable, great power, mighty strength. All of those words culturally would have spoken to the Ephesian church. And so it's not that Paul's saying power is bad. It's that he's saying, here is another kind of power, church. Here is the power I want for you. There's a kind of power that comes and goes. As we know, the city of Ephesus doesn't exist in the same way as it did back then. Powers come and go. History shows us that civilizations rise and civilizations fall, governments rise and governments fall, and we all are enmeshed in that power struggle. But it does not last. And so Paul wisely is thinking, church, let me help you to tap into a power that does last. Now, stars are basically what light our world, because our sun is a star. Do you remember the first time you learned that? I remember the first time I learned that when I looked in the sky and I saw these little tiny stars, you know, and you kind of grow up understanding them, and they make figures. I always like to follow kind of what things look like. And then when you learn our sun is a star, you're like, wow, that changes it, doesn't it? That's a pretty powerful star. Stars are pretty powerful. They need fuel for their power. And Paul is basically, in the same way, talking about power to enlighten. But he's saying that the way the world gets power is not the way I want you to get power. There's another way. There's a way that's found in Christ, a way that's found in Jesus, who, it says, God placed all things under his feet. That the light and life of Jesus is the power we tap into, because Jesus illuminates God. Jesus is the star or the sun that illuminates who God is.